Good morning, this is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for July 29th around 10 a.m. The Atlantic Basin is very quiet at this time. No development is expected over the next several days, so I wanted to take an opportunity to do a video update this morning to kind of recap what's happened so far this season and why things are slow at the current time. So let's get right to it. Here is a look at the entire Atlantic Basin, the visible satellite courtesy of NOAA, and you can see there's not a lot going on out in the basin right now. In fact, mainly upper level wind shear. Let's put the wind shear on the map, and you can see that the upper level winds are indicating that we have wind shear right through the Caribbean, wrapping into this Tut upper level low right near Bermuda, and that is causing unfavorable conditions for the Caribbean and off the coast of the United States at this time. However, out in the Atlantic, the trade winds in the intertropical convergence zone continue from Africa towards the Lesser Antilles, but there's a lot of dry air still out here. I'll show you images on that in just a minute, but there is one wave off the coast of Africa, and it looks like it's mid-level in nature. The center is probably up in here somewhere, and the models have backed off on this development for this, by the way, so we're probably not going to see much out of this at all. Now, I like to use this satellite image from the Regional and Mesoscale Meteorological Branch, and what they do is show the satellite images with the enhanced cloud patterns showing the dry air. So let's take a look at what's happening here in Africa. We have a lot of dry air in the northern portions of Africa, and then you'll notice as these waves travel and come off the coast of Africa, they're collapsing as the dry air is moving in tandem with these tropical waves. So once the temperature differential between the land and the sea happens and the dry air to the north, the waves are basically collapsing on themselves as they come off the coast. And then they have to wait to develop until they get further west where there's a higher moisture content. But you can see that we have westerly winds in the upper levels coming right across Africa, and it's kind of, in some cases it enhances some of these waves, but in other cases it disrupts their low-level circulation. So they're not real robust when they come off the coast to begin with. But as the season progresses, when we get later in August and September, these waves will become much more robust out here, and we'll see this dry air probably move further to the north and get away from the intertropical convergence zone, allow some of these waves to develop as they come off the coast of Africa. But basically, you can see that dry air is getting sucked down into these tropical waves, moving in tandem with them as they come off the coast of Africa. So not real favorable out there right now. I like to use this image from the Earth Systems Research Laboratory, and what it does is it shows you the pressure anomalies compared to average over the last 90 days. And you can see, if you look to the right of the image, you can see off Africa, the greens and the yellows would be above average sea surface pressures. Compared to the Gulf of Mexico, it's a little bit lower in the Gulf. But overall, if you look at the Atlantic and the Pacific, pressures are above normal compared to where they should be at this time of the year. And when you see the darker, when you get into the blues and the purples, that's when you can see the really big, intense, large systems develop. And we'll see maybe if that lowers a little bit as the height of the season approaches. But right now, the pressure anomalies are above normal, which is another of many factors of why we're not seeing these robust systems coming off Africa and maintaining themselves as they move off to the west. We'll see if that changes toward the height of the season. By the way, these links can be found on my predictions page, hurricanecity.com/predictions, down towards the bottom. This is an image of the dry Saharan air layer from July 16th. This is when Tropical Storm Don was trying to develop south of that dark red circle on your screen, and that is the dry air, and that's been moving in tandem with these tropical waves all through July. Surprisingly, once Don got away from that dry air a little bit, right near the Windward Islands is when the system began to became a tropical storm and hit the southern islands as a tropical storm. But this just goes to show you the problem with waves in July so far that they've had is battling the dry air. Now we fast forward to the 26th, and you can see the same basic area, but the dry air is a little less pronounced as it was earlier, but still there enough to disrupt tropical waves. And now we look at yesterday's dry air map, and you can see the newest wave coming off of Africa again, having to deal with dry air just to its north over the Cape Verde Islands, and they continue wrapping that dry air into their systems. And now here is today's shot of the dry Saharan air, and again it's wrapping around our system out there, which temporarily was labeled as Invest 97L. I don't know what the reasoning was for that, but it's no longer an Invest. But you can see the dry air wrapping in once again to the system, preventing development, and this should travel in tandem with this system until it gets toward the islands, where it would have a better chance of developing once it leaves the dry air. So let's go back now and look at a recap of the season so far. This was the first landfalling tropical storm of the 2017 hurricane season, and that was Tropical Storm Brett back on June 19th that affected Grenada and mainly Trinidad. It passed right over Trinidad, and the northern fringes affected Grenada. So it's considered a brush for Grenada in the Hurricane City database, and that was a 40-mile-per-hour system. The biggest story so far this hurricane season has been Tropical Storm Cindy, which affected the northern Gulf Coast on June 21st and 22nd. And this was kind of a lopsided system. All the convection was to the right of the center of circulation, which is typical for the northern Gulf. But then as it approached the Cameron, Louisiana area, it got a little bit better organized and was more circular. So it did impact, probably the greatest impacts were in the western Louisiana area and the Texas coastline near Port Arthur. We have it as a brush for Galveston, Intracoastal City, Louisiana's tropical storm impacts, Morgan City, Grand Isle, Louisiana, a brush for New Orleans, but it did not directly impact Mississippi and Alabama, even though they did get some rough weather and some severe weather out of the system. The tropical storm force wind field was not sustained in this area. In fact, Gulf Shores, Alabama is in my top 5 this year, and it just went west of there, so that does not count as an impact from a tropical storm in the Gulf Shores area. Even though they did get impacted by some of the weather from this, there was not sustained tropical storm force impacts in that area. And most recently, we had Tropical Storm Dawn, which impacted the southern Windward Islands on July 18th. Here is the satellite tracking map from the front page of Hurricane City showing the models embedded with the National Hurricane Center forecast cone for a system to hit there as a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. That did not happen. It hit with 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm force winds and did cause some damage, some flooding in the southern Windward Islands. And here is the wind field for Tropical Storm Dawn. Notice a very tiny, skinny tropical storm force wind field passed right over the island of Grenada. So that's been the highest impacted area so far this season, is the island of Grenada, affected by both Brett and Dawn. So we'll see if that's a trend going later into the hurricane season. Are we going to have southern trackers heading through the southern Windward Islands? Only time will tell, but generally the intertropical convergence zone has been pretty far south in July, and that should shift further north as the season progresses. So I would expect more landfalling systems north of the southern Windward Islands, more like toward the Leeward Islands as the season progresses. And one final image I want to show. This is a really interesting graphic here showing the cities in the Hurricane City database piled on top of the time frame of an area most likely to be impacted by a hurricane. And you'll notice the most impacted areas happen at the height of the hurricane season between September 7th and the 13th, but the majority of these areas get impacted between mid-August and mid-October, what I like to call the real hurricane season. But earliest in the season, usually you get the western Gulf of Mexico impacted earlier, and then as you get later in the season, it shifts to the east. And then late in the season, when you get into mid-October, it starts shifting back towards Florida, the western Caribbean Sea, and the Bahamas. So we'll see if this pans out as the season progresses. So anyway, to wrap things up, the Atlantic Basin is quiet at this time. Things may pick up in a week or two as the moisture content increases out in the mean development region of the Atlantic. And before I go, I want to quickly mention I do updates on Twitter, usually about once or twice a day. I'm not real active on it, but I do post something usually early in the morning and sometimes late in the afternoon. Now, if there's an active system out there that's threatening land, I'll do much more frequent updates on Twitter. You can also find me on Facebook, Hurricane City Tracking. Just type in Hurricane City Tracking, and I have all my opinions on everything from A to Z on that page. But that's it. Check out these social networks when you get a chance, and follow me at Hurricane City. We'll keep track. I'll be back with another update video if conditions warrant in the Atlantic Basin. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. I'm Jim Williams.